So let's go back in time to the late 1920s. All across India, there was this feeling in the air, a feeling of hope. People were really expecting some major political changes, you know? They thought they'd finally get more control over their own country's future. But, well, a single decision from the British government was about to change everything. It didn't just crush these hopes, it actually lit a spark that would completely change India's struggle for freedom. You see, India was at a real crossroads. Everyone was talking about reform. The feeling was that the British would finally work with Indians to decide the future. But what arrived from London? Well, it wasn't a partnership. It was a commission, sent to draw the roadmap for India's destiny. Now, this was supposed to be a step forward, a reform, right? But it was seen as a huge insult, and it caused an uproar all over the country.
So what was this commission all about? Well, the British government created what they called a statutory commission, and its official job was to come to India, study how things were run, and suggest changes to the constitution. This was a big deal. It would basically decide the political future of the country. Now, the idea of a commission itself wasn't the issue. The real problem, the thing that made everyone so angry, was who was actually on it. So, in 1927, this commission was sent over from Britain. Its chairman was a man named Sir John Simon, and that's why everyone started calling it the Simon Commission. And like we said, its job was to look at India's constitution and suggest changes. On the surface, it sounds quite forward-thinking, doesn't it? But there was a huge, massive problem with it, a flaw so obvious that nobody in India could possibly overlook it. And here's the flaw. Look at that number, 0. That's the number of Indian members on the commission. Can you believe it? A commission sent to decide the future of India had not one single Indian on it. They were all British. This wasn't just a mistake. It was seen as a deep, deep insult. I mean, the question everyone was asking was simple. How can a group of foreigners decide our fate without even asking us? So, how did the nation react? Well, the response was immediate, and it was powerful. This wasn't just a few protests here and there. This was a unified, nationwide movement. The insult of the Simon Commission actually did something incredible. It brought all sorts of different political groups together, united by a common sense of anger. So when the commission finally landed in India in 1928, they were greeted with black flags and huge demonstrations. And this is so important. It wasn't just one group. All the major parties, from the Indian National Congress to the Muslim League, they all joined in the protests together. For that moment, all their political differences were forgotten. The entire country was standing as one against this all-white commission. And the protests had one simple, powerful slogan that everyone chanted, "Simon, go back." Just 3 words. But these 3 words echoed all over India. It didn't matter if it was a big city or a small town. Wherever the commission tried to go, this is what they heard. It became the rallying cry for a whole nation that was saying, "You cannot ignore us." Now, these protests were meant to be peaceful, but the police response was often very harsh. And during one of these protests, a very senior and respected leader, Lala Lajpat Rai, was badly injured by the police. Tragically, he died from those injuries later on. His death sent a shockwave of anger across the country. It was a painful reminder of the price of protest and became a powerful symbol of British oppression. All of this energy, all this anger from the protests, it forced the Indian National Congress to ask a really important question. What exactly were they fighting for? What was the ultimate goal? Was it enough to just have self-government within the British Empire? Or was it finally time to demand complete and total independence? Well, seeing how things were escalating, the British Viceroy at the time, Lord Irwin, tried to calm everyone down. He made a very vague offer. He said maybe, at some point in the future, India could have dominion status. Now, dominion status basically meant India could have its own government, but it would still be a part of the British Empire. The problem was, this was just a suggestion. There was no real plan, no date, no timeline, and for many people, it just felt like too little and way too late. And this vague offer actually created a split inside the Congress Party. On one side, you had the older, more moderate leaders. They thought, okay, this is a start, we can negotiate from here. But on the other side, there was a younger, more radical group, and they were getting very impatient. For them, the time for compromise was over. They argued that dominion status wasn't real freedom at all. This new generation of leaders was much more assertive. I'm talking about people like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhas Chandra Bose. They were making powerful arguments that, look, the time for these half steps is over. For them, there was only one goal that mattered, and that was complete, total, absolute independence from Britain. So, you have this huge debate happening, right? Dominion status versus full independence. And this whole argument finally came to a head at a historic meeting of the Indian National Congress in Lahore. This was the moment of decision. This was in December of 1929. And with Jawaharlal Nehru as the president, the atmosphere at that Lahore session was absolutely electric. In the end, it was the arguments of the younger leaders that won. The Congress Party made a huge decision. They officially rejected the offer of Dominion status, and instead, they adopted a bold new goal for the entire nation. And that new goal was summed up in two powerful words: Purna Swaraj. So what does that mean? It means complete independence. This was a massive shift. The goal was no longer to just make changes to the British system. The goal now was to cut all ties with the British Empire and for India to become a totally free and sovereign country. Okay, so Purna Swaraj was the new goal. But a political decision like that can feel a bit abstract, can it? The leaders knew they needed to make this idea of complete freedom feel real for every single person in India. So they planned something, a symbolic national event. And a special date was chosen for this, January 26, 1930. The declaration was made that this day would be celebrated as India's Independence Day. People all across the country were asked to come together, celebrate, and take a pledge, a promise to keep fighting until Purna Swaraj was achieved. It was a call for the whole nation to get involved. The pledge that people took on that day was incredibly powerful. Listen to a part of it. We believe that it is the inalienable right of the Indian people to have freedom and to enjoy the fruits of their toil. It ends by saying that because of this right, India must cut its ties with Britain and achieve Purna Swaraj, or complete independence. So, let's just quickly look back at how fast all of this happened. Think about it. In 1928, the Simon Commission arrives and protests erupt. Fast forward to October 1929, and Lord Irwin makes that vague offer of Dominion status. Just 2 months later, in December 1929, the Lahore Congress says no thank you to that, and instead demands Purna Swaraj. And then, on January 26, 1930, India celebrates its very first Independence Day. In less than 2 years, the entire goal of the freedom struggle had completely changed. But declaring independence is one thing. Actually achieving it is a whole different challenge. So the big question was, now what? How could they actually achieve this huge goal? How could they get millions of people across India to join the struggle together? The answer, as it turns out, would come from Mahatma Gandhi. And it would involve something very, very simple, something you find in every single kitchen: a grain of salt.